I am meeting Tal Ben Shahar at the university, where he teaches positive psychology. The rising popularity of the positive aspect of psychology brings with it a fresh, new approach, not only to the field of psychology, but also to the academia at large.
I'm the right person to teach a class on positive psychology, on happiness. Why? Because I wasn't born with quote-unquote happy genes. I was born with a tendency toward anxiety.
Tal is a lecturer in high demand all over the world. His lectures attract thousands of people who come to hear about self-esteem, life goals, leadership psychology, and primarily about happiness, the path to happiness.
When I first taught positive psychology, I was a resident tutor in one of the dorms. And I remember having lunch one day, and a student, his name is Matt, came to me and said, "May I join you for lunch?" And I said, "Sure." So he sat down next to me, and then he said to me, "Tal, you know, I hear you're teaching a class on happiness." And I said, "Yes, that's right." And he said, "You know, my roommates are taking your class." And he said, "Tal, you've got to be careful now." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if I see you unhappy, I'll tell them." Now, I actually used that as a teaching opportunity the next day in class, and I told my students that the last thing in the world I want them to think is that I, as the teacher of the happiness course, experience a constant high, or that they, by the end of the semester or year, will experience a constant high. There are two kinds of people who don't experience painful emotions, such as anger or disappointment or envy. The first kind are the psychopaths. By definition, these people don't experience painful emotions. The second type of people who don't experience these emotions are dead people, exactly. So you know, if you experience these emotions, it's actually a good sign.
Tal's career began on the squash courts, and this seemed the intended vocation for someone who, at the age of 20, became the Israeli squash champion.
So this is where I spent most of my childhood, hitting the ball up and down, hours and hours a day. Many of the most important lessons I actually learned on the squash court, whether it's discipline, hard work, the importance of repetition, and the fact that there are no miracles, there are no shortcuts. It takes work and hard work to improve, whether it's on the squash court, whether it's psychologically in terms of mental health. It's hard work. Positive psychology is the science of happiness. Essentially what it does is focuses on what works. Happiness, well-being, joy, success. When a client, a patient comes into a traditional clinical psychologist, the first question that would be asked is, so what's wrong? What brought you here? How can I help? A positive psychologist would ask, so what's going right in your life? What is going well? And then let's build on that. It looks at what is working in relationships, it looks at what is working in individual, what is working in organizations, and through that focus on the good, it makes relationships better, it helps individuals, and potentially it can help the world. The problem today is not that we don't have enough knowledge. It's not that we don't have enough information. We do. The problem is that it's not accessible. It's not accessible to the person on the street. It's also not accessible to a person who spends his or her life studying. Because of specialization, these people very often are myopic. They only see their field, and they don't know what is out there. And in a sense, I see myself as creating that bridge between the knowledge that is out there and the people who need that knowledge, the consumers of that information. Everything that I teach, everything that I write has to fulfill two criteria. First, it has to have the scientific foundation. It has to be something that has been tested and retested. Second, it has to be applicable. things that people can take and use in their lives.
You know, the best advice that my wife Tammy and I got after having our first kid, David, was from our pediatrician. David was born in Beth Israel in Boston, and he was born in the middle of the night, and then at around 7 a.m. Our pediatrician comes into the room to check up on Tammy, check up on David. For some reason, he didn't check up on me. And, you know, everything was fine. And as he was about to leave the room, he looks back and he says, just one more thing. He says, over the next few months, you're going to be experiencing every single kind of emotion to the extreme. You're going to experience extreme joy, and you're going to experience extreme frustration. You're going to experience happiness and calm, and you're going to be extremely anxious and unhappy at times. He said every single kind of emotion to the extreme, and that's normal, that's natural. We all go through it. That was the best advice that we received.
Tal uses personal stories in order to illustrate certain points. His life and family become tangible and authentic examples for the application of positive psychology in daily life.
So, for example, after about a month after David's birth, I actually started to feel some envy toward David. Here was someone who was getting more attention than I was, no matter how much I cried. Now, 5 minutes later, I would experience this most intense love toward David. Normally, I would have said to myself, what a hypocrite. How can you 1 minute experience envy toward him and the next minute you love him? Something must be wrong with you. But because I had the pediatrician's voice at the back of my mind telling me, it's normal, it's natural, we all go through it. Because I had that voice giving me the permission to be human, I allowed myself to experience the envy, and it flowed through me.
As a student at Harvard, Tal took courses in positive psychology, and now, as a Harvard lecturer, his popularity is unprecedented. 800 students signed up for his first course, and over 1,600 came to listen on the subject of leadership psychology. Today, his courses are taught on over 100 campuses throughout America.
For the first time, we have a science of happiness. What we know from plenty of research today is that material affluence is a very poor predictor of well-being. Extra money makes very little difference, and yet people spend most of their time, most of their lives chasing that next promotion, chasing that extra payment, as if that would make them happier. What is a good predictor of well-being is what Tim Kasser, who is a humanistic psychologist, calls time affluence. It's the feeling that we have time. It's the feeling that we can enjoy our relationships. It's the feeling that we can savor anything from a glass of wine to a good friend, anything from a nice walk outside to our work. The number one predictor of happiness, of well-being, is time spent with people we care about and who care about us. Whether it's in the context of romantic relationships, whether it's in the context of families, whether it's close, intimate soulmates.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. My mom is the best cook in the world. You know, I have a class on perfectionism, and I say that there is no perfect, with one exception. The problem in our culture today is that we don't take enough time to spend with people we love, because other things become more important. I remember growing up when friends used to come to my parents' house. They used to sit down, they used to laugh a lot, really take their time, have fun, enjoy themselves. Today, when my friends come over, or when the next generation's friends come over, the time they spend together is qualitatively different. We are on the phone, or doing emails, or checking messages, doing something, and we're not present. And we pay a very high price for this, for not being in the here and now, for not deriving the maximum benefit that we can from intimate, close, wonderful
relationships.
The important thing, though, when we talk about relationships is to know yourself, is to know your needs. We all have different needs. For example, lasagna is my favorite food. This is the famous lasagna. I devour a lot of it. However, even with lasagna, my favorite food, I don't want to eat it every day, all day. The most important thing in my life is my relationship with my family. By far the most important thing in my life. However, I don't want to spend all my days, every day, with my family. I also need my quota of solitude. I also need my time with friends. I also need my time writing. I also need my time exercising. So the thing is to find what is your lasagna quota when it comes to friendship.
There are treasures of happiness inside us and all around us. The challenge is to appreciate them. When do we begin to appreciate our health? When we're ill? When do we begin to appreciate life? When our life is endangered or when we lose someone dear to us? It is interesting that the word appreciate has two meanings. One meaning is to say thank you for something, and that's a nice thing to do. The second meaning of the word appreciate is to grow. So for example, we put money in the bank, the money appreciates. And that captures a very important element of appreciation. When we appreciate the good appreciates. We have more of it. When I appreciate the good in my relationship, the relationship grows, it improves. When I appreciate the good in myself, the good in me grows. And the question is, do we need to wait? Do we need to wait for something external, tragic, extraordinary to happen for us to appreciate what we already have? And the answer is no, we don't need to wait if we cultivate the habit of gratitude.
I want to share with you some things about my life, some biographical details from my past.
Another of Ta's demonstrative methods involves a simple technique of taking a story and telling it from two different perspectives. Firstly, from a negative point of view, and then with a positive outlook.
I have a mild case of ADD. It makes it very difficult for me to focus. It makes it very difficult for me to read material. It has always been a challenge since the time I remember myself in school. It's hard. In high school, I really, really wanted to get into an advanced program in math. I tried to get into it time and again I failed. It devastated me. My dream since the age of 11 was to become the world squash champion. At the age of 20, I got injured. The injury was so bad the doctor told me, strongly advised me to stop playing squash. At the age of 20, I gave up my aspirations of a professional squash career. I gave up my dream. I went over to the University of Cambridge to get my PhD in the School of Education there. And then at the end of the first year, they notified me that I'm being thrown out of the program. I was the only person in my year to be thrown out of a PhD program. I was one of the few in the history of the School of Education to be thrown out of the PhD program. So I wasted a whole year. And it was incredibly, incredibly humiliating. God, I am so unlucky.
And now the exact same story from a positive point of view.
I have a mild case of ADD, which is wonderful because it's like I have my own internal happiness mechanism in that it forces me to only read things that I'm really, really interested in. An internal happiness mechanism. Wow! I really, really wanted to get into a prestigious math program. And I tried time and again, and I didn't get in. And it really hurt me when I didn't get in. But it turned out for the best. Because had I gotten in, I would have had no time to play squash, which I really loved. And the following year, I became the Israeli national champion. There's no chance that I would have become the national champion had I gotten into that program. I went over to Cambridge, England, to get my PhD in the School of Education. The committee of professors told me that I'm being thrown out of the program. That was devastating for me. It was really a very important experience for me because it was humbling. You know, I came out of Harvard, graduated with honors, did really well, thought I was so good, knew everything, didn't really need to work hard, that everything would come to me. Real arrogant. And that experience in Cambridge really brought me down to earth, so healthy, so good for me. And it's thanks to that experience that I am where I am today. And there is nowhere else I would rather be. God, I am so lucky.
I think that we are a single BA academic program that we demand our first-year students to take a course on positive psychology. The main message is you, as a psychologist, can contribute to the improvement of the welfare and well-being of your community and other people around the world.
At the time before I started studying, I was very focused inwards. I wanted to achieve a lot. I was rather egoistic, focusing on myself, my career ambitions. I wasn't sharing my strengths and virtues with others, and I wasn't accepting others' strengths and virtues either. So I was missing out on all levels. The course is about a completely different mindset. The course teaches you or shows you a certain path to becoming more active and to utilizing your strengths and your virtues to literally make a change, not simply be just another student.
Our first-year students, after having taken this course of positive psychology, decide that they want to contribute to children in the south area of Israel, in the border of Gaza Strip, and to do something to improve their well-being, their morale, their resilience, and their coping skills against the missile attacks. And so they talk with Tal and create a summer camp of 4 days that was organized around the principles of positive psychology.
It's something that exists, it's everywhere. Everybody has it, these strengths.
Through activities such as rafting, horseback riding, and guided imagination, the children develop team and leadership skills and, most importantly, experience a feeling of empowerment, enabling them to adopt a positive outlook.
You're talking with them about the climbing, about how they did it, what they felt when their friend helped them. And then they learn what was good, what was wrong, what can they do better. It's very easy to say it, it's hard to do it with yourself, but this is what the positive psychology does. It tries to give you tools to do that.
You can really learn a lot about yourself and about the world around you while you're studying, well after the lesson itself is over, if it's at home or anywhere else.
And this is something that in my 20 years of professional experience, no student came, not from the first year, not from BA program, not from MA program, not from PhD program, came and asked me how I, as a psychologist, can help other people. But I don't believe that there are another kind of students here than in other universities. I think there are the same students, but with a single difference. And the difference was made by Tal and the positive psychology course that provide them with this message. You, as a psychologist, has the responsibility and the ability to create a change and to have an impact on society.
I define happiness as the intersection, as the overlap between meaning and pleasure. It's when we engage in activities that are pleasurable, that are enjoyable for us, and that are meaningful for us, that provide us that deep sense of purpose. That's when we are at our happiest. So for example, my happiest experiences come from teaching. I enjoy teaching, I enjoy sharing the material I care about so much, and I have a deep sense of purpose when I do that. The meaning is at its highest for me when I see my students taking these ideas and applying them.
Tal is married to Tammy and they have 2 children. Often, their daily lives become the main subject in his lectures.
One of the most troubling phenomena today in our culture is the breakup of relationships, where divorce rates are extremely high, and also many people who do stay together are doing it out of inertia, are not happy together. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of what constitutes healthy relationships, what makes for a great marriage or for a great long-term partnership. The important thing to understand is that relationships in the long term have the potential to be better. There's a lot of interesting work by people like David Schnarch, who's a marital therapist, showing how relationships can improve over a lifetime. One of the main ideas that David Schnarch talks about is the notion of knowing and being known, opening up in terms of our weaknesses, opening up in terms of our strengths. It means getting to know the deep secrets of our partner and them getting to know us better as well. In other words, if we open up, if we get to know our partner better, if our partner gets to know us better, that is when we cultivate intimacy, and that is when, in the long term, we have more passion in the relationship.
How can we make our children happier?
The best way for us to serve our children, to help them become happier, is for us to work on our own happiness. Because ultimately, children do what we do rather than what we say. So if my child sees me pursuing my passions, doing things that are personally meaningful and enjoyable for me, if my daughter sees me thriving, enjoying my work, then she's much more likely to look for these elements and to find these elements in her life. Similarly, if we want our children to be honest, the first thing we need to do is exemplify honesty. So it's by example that we teach much more than by sermonizing, by preaching.
Tal was always strong charactered. We didn't have to push him to anything. He pushed himself very hard, and he liked it. Nobody forced him to.
I gave them the opportunity to try, and I believed, I said, you will find something, you would like it, you will see.
The top priority for my parents was, and I know that it was because I've always felt it, I've always known it, was to nourish us, the kids, whether it's to nourish us physically with the food that they made, but also in terms of food for thought. And this is how I try to be now as a father. So my father is my role model as a father. My mom is my role model as a mother. And I think that is what kids need more than anything else. You know, we talk about love and it seems a little bit, okay, so what does that really mean? It means nourishment. Physical nourishment, intellectual nourishment, spiritual nourishment, and of course, nourishment of the heart. Many people ask me for that one tip on becoming happier. And if I really had to boil it down to one, it would be physical exercise. There's a lot of research now showing how physical exercise has the same effect as some of our most powerful psychiatric drugs. As little as 3 times a week of 30 minutes of exercise will have the same impact as antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs. Another important element of sports in general is the repetition. So for example, there's research now showing how when we meditate for as little as 20 minutes each day, thinking about a mantra or focusing on our breath, that can actually change the way our brain functions, making us more resilient in the face of painful emotions, more susceptible to positive emotions. And meditation is very much like playing sports, repeating the same motion again and again. We don't exercise enough, and we weren't born to be sedentary. We weren't born to be sitting, talking, being lazy physically. We were born to run after an antelope for lunch or run away from a lion so that we don't become lunch. This is our constitution. And when we frustrate this need, this need for physical exercise, we pay a price. Just like we would pay a price if we frustrate the need for vitamins or for oxygen. We need to exercise. Our foreparents used to walk between 7 and 10 kilometers a day, over 6 miles a day. Today, how far do we walk? Well, that depends how far we park our car. And we need to go back to being active. The few deep breaths in the morning, the few deep breaths before we go into a meeting, that's very important. The few deep breaths when we are standing in a traffic light and waiting. These little mini happiness boosters, is how I call them, can really help to transform our overall experience of the day. Positive psychology does more than just help us become happier. It also helps us to better deal with difficult situations. It helps us to become more resilient. It helps us to better deal with anxiety or depression. It's like strengthening our psychological immune system. And when we have a strong immune system on the physical level, it doesn't mean we don't get sick. We do get sick. It means that we get sick less often, and when we do get sick, we recover more promptly. Same with a psychological immune system, with positive psychology. People who focus on their strengths, people who cultivate happiness, people who work and improve their relationships are better able to deal with hardships, with difficulties when these inevitably arise.
As you know, today I'm certainly happier than I was 15 years ago, and 15 years from now I hope to be happier than I am today. So I know that it's possible to change.
I think what's unique about Tal, what's so inspiring about him, is that he's very humble in his ways, and that he's gained a lot from all of his experiences. He was wise enough to utilize his strengths to carry on and go up to the next level.
Many people ask me, so Tal, are you happy? And I can't really answer that question because I don't know how to measure it. And we still don't have the precise tools to measure what is happiness versus unhappiness. So my answer to that question is that today I'm happier than I was 15 years ago when I basically embarked on this journey. And 15 years from now, I certainly hope to be happier than I am today. Happiness is not a binary either or. Today I'm unhappy, tomorrow I am happy. It's rather on a continuum. It's a journey, it's a lifelong journey, a journey that ends when life ends.
I leave here feeling uplifted and having acquired a number of tips from Tal's theory. Give yourself permission to be human. Remember that happiness is mainly dependent on our state of mind. Express gratitude whenever possible. Simplify things as much as you can. And finally, yes, sport. Physical exercise.
Enough talking, let's get to work. So we're going to start with the forehand. So you start with a U-shaped arm, you come down and hit the ball, and you end with a U-shape. Okay? Go for it. Great. Stai la banda. יופי. בוא נשחק עכשיו אני.